Happy Tuesday, everyone. Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting and Committee of the Whole meeting. The City Council meeting is called to order. I kindly ask our distinguished and honorable City Clerk to please take the roll call.
Bruno?
Here.
Burkhart?
Here.
Ruby?
Here.
Caven?
Here.
Kilberg?
Here.
Kasserag?
Here.
Maladra?
Here.
Marks?
Here.
Mayor? Here. Swanson?
Here. We are always delighted to have a police officer with us at these meetings, and we are especially delighted to have Officer Parisi with us tonight. Officer Parisi, would you kindly lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Officer Parisi, I understand that just a week or so ago, it was your 18th anniversary with us at the City of Geneva. Happy anniversary and thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, item 4, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments this evening? Item 5 is the omnibus agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are considered to be routine by this council, and all those items can be enacted with one motion. Is there such a motion? Mr. Swanson makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Caven. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Swanson?
Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
Burkhart?
Aye.
Ruby?
Aye.
Caven?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Kasserag?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
Mayor?
Aye.
With 10 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 absent, item 5, the omnibus agenda has been approved by this council. We jump to item number 10, municipal bills for payment. We kindly ask our city clerk to read the bills in their aggregate for our consideration.
All right. The expenditure summary report as of January 3rd is $1,914,001.30. And the expenditure summary report as of January 17th is $4,901,584.91.
Mayor, I move that we approve and pay the bills as read. The individual items that add up to that amount can be found in tonight's City Council packet on the city website.
Alderman Bruno makes the motion to pay the bills as presented, which are available on the city's website and in each council member's packet. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Mr. Marks. Any questions related to the bills? If not, Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
All right. Bruno?
Aye.
Burkhart? Aye. Ruby?
Aye.
Caven?
Aye.
Kilberg? Aye. Kasserag?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
Mayor?
Aye.
Swanson?
Aye.
With 10 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 absent, the municipal bills for payment have been approved by this council. We jump to Committee of the Whole items of business. Item 11A is approved resolution number 2023-01, authorizing acceptance of a proposal from GovHR USA LLC for a classification and compensation study in an amount not to exceed $35,500. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Kosarog makes the motion, seconded by Ms. Mayer. Ms. Dawkins.
Sure. So as we discussed at the COW meeting, the recommendation is to consider acceptance of the proposal from GovHR USA LLC to conduct a classification and compensation study for 68 unrepresented positions. The proposal includes items such as performing job audit and analysis, reviewing and updating job descriptions, and performing point factor evaluations. They will also review the current performance evaluation system and identify comparable communities. It was asked at the previous meeting whether we could conduct the study in conjunction with either St. Charles or Batavia. That was deemed infeasible as those communities had previously completed their respective studies prior to our 5-year schedule. Ensuring that the city's compensation and classification plan is current and competitive is essential if the city intends to continue to fill key positions. In addition, the study is integral to helping staff and supervisors clearly understand their roles and responsibilities in this ever-changing environment. Failure to invest in this study has the potential to jeopardize the city's position to identify, recruit, and retain top talent. We do have our HR generalist with us today, Mira Johnson, if there's any additional questions or comments.
Are there any comments from the dais for Ms. Johnson? Seeing none? Oh, forgive me, Ms. Ruby.
Thank you. Forgive me. I think our staff is wonderful. I just am not sold on this. I don't know if there's anything that you can add that might convince me, but I just, I'm struggling to see the value in it.
Well, I will say that it's become increasingly difficult for me to fill positions. And there are communities that are neighboring to us. For example, neighboring community just posted an analyst position. And because our study is 5 years old, our starting pay for the same position is $63,000. They just posted it at $73,000 for starting pay. So imagine if I go out and I say I want an analyst at the same time that community says they want an analyst. Who am I going to get and how am I going to recruit someone? So it makes it more difficult for me to do my job when we have an outdated compensation plan in place.
Okay, so to counter that, just the way my brain works, if I were in your position, I would think if I were advertising a position, I could just Google that particular position for the salary range and, just find that particular need without much difficulty, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I'm bound by our compensation plan, which this board approved and which, with the budget, you approve increases to that annually. And so the starting pay right now is $63,000. Another
Okay.
community is saying they're going to pay $73,000 because they've done an updated compensation plan and study, and they're paying at the market rate.
Okay. So is it possible to increase, I don't know, feedback, our budget, our salary budget, without this study? Can we pad our budget a little bit so that we have the room if and when needed?
I mean, the purpose of a classification and compensation study is not just the compensation, it's also the classification, ensuring that each job is positioned within the organization as well as external comparables. So when you're marketing a certain position, or let's say you're filling a different position, you want to know where it fits within our plan.
Sure.
And these are plans that are published and on the website and available, so people know this before you actually post a job, what the city pays for jobs. So while in-house, you could certainly do these types of studies, we have found over the years, and the council adopted a policy many years ago that we do this every 5 years, is to get that outside perspective, and so that it doesn't feel like it's coming from staff saying, we need to inflate our salaries. It's truly more of a neutral look at how our study and how our classifications compare to those communities that we determine are comparable to us. It's not every community. That neighboring community may or may not be a comparable community. Likely it is because it's so close, but it may or may not. So it's not just Googling what these jobs pay, it's finding out what they truly do pay from the source who pays them, and then ensuring that our classification system is appropriate and is internally equitable as well as externally equitable.
Okay. And historically, have we done this every 5 years?
Historically, we have.
For how many years?
Well, I would say the last big study where the council adopted the guidelines that said we would do this every 5 years was in 2007.
Okay. Okay, that's it for me for now. I would love if someone else would like to chime in and.
Mr. Kilberg?
Having the opportunity to review the budget for next year, how, some of the example that you gave us, how did that play into the budgeting process? And we're making some projections as to apparently where we think we need to be in some of these areas, and then it's factored into the budget for 23, 24, as well as 24, 25. Is that a safe assumption, or?
That would be for
Yeah,
Assistant McCready.
yes, we do, when we go through the budgeting process, the Administrative Services Department does what's position budgeting for the city. That's our deep dive into looking at all the assumptions we make for personnel expenditures. That includes salary, compensation. That includes looking at estimates, what we call maintenance to the wage scale. So every year, the City Council, as part of the budget adoption process, adopts a wage scale for the organization. We do periodically look at what the market's doing to make adjustments to that, so part of that is reflected in the budget. But to Mara's point, the study looks at the broader market. It's a broader market analysis to see how Geneva is moving and where we sit in comparison to not only our comparables, but our competitors out there. The same organizations that employees are leaving to go and the same organizations that top talent is going.
And I would add, as has happened in the past when we've done these, while a budget is set, a budget is a planning document, and we'll talk about that at the next meeting. But when the study comes back, whatever market rate adjustments need to happen, if it's not budgeted, then we come to the council and we determine, is that something that we can amend the budget to include? Is it something that we need to phase in over a year or two, which is what we did the last time. We phased it in over 2 years because we were significantly out of market. I would also note that you kind of have an informal compensation study that happens every 4 years, every year, because you have 4 union contracts that are on 4-year cycles, and each year a different contract expires, and each year they're negotiating another 4-year contract. So now you have those employees, which make up, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's more than half of your employees who now are guaranteed what their wages will be for 4 years, and they know every 4 years they get to talk about it again because they have that contract. This is again, looking at internal equity and external equity.
In response, looking at the majority of the contracts that we've negotiated over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been looking at somewhere, am I safe to say, between 2.5 to maybe 3.5, as high as 4%. And if we look at, and again, this is really probably more of a topic for our budget discussion, but if you look at the cumulative salary figure or wage figure, it's substantially more than that. So I guess as we look further down the road as far as the committee of the whole meeting, I mean, maybe that's the topic for some discussion. But again, I appreciate your response and thank you for your time.
Ms. Burkhart?
Thank you, Mayor. My employer just went through one of these, and I know what a massive undertaking it is and how much work is involved. It resulted in some wage shifts for a lot of different classifications, including mine. I think the labor market has gone, I mean, since COVID has.
So hard.
Is just,
Yeah.
we're in, I think we don't even understand like the massive shift we're in right now and what employees are willing to give their employers and the kind of conditions they expect to work in. And like I said, I don't even know that we understand what we're in the midst of. And so I think to keep that top talent, we have to do a study like this so that we know that we're competitive and we have the evidence to show it. There's just a lot of competition out there for good people, and a lot of those competitors can offer things like remote work and, more flexible hours or different kind of retirement benefits. And so I'm in favor of this study. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for addressing everyone's concerns. I voted against this at our previous COW, not because I disagree with doing the study. I thought the contract itself was too rich and too expensive. The previous one we did was, I believe, $16,000. This one is now $35.5. That's a huge increase, and so I still oppose that on the basis of just the cost. However, the concept itself, I agree with. I think it's just too rich for this purpose. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Mr. Marks?
Was there something added to this study that wasn't in the past? Because, again, it is a large increase, or is that just the economics right now out there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the economics right now. Different people do different things and look at different things. I would have to go back and look at the exact scope of it previously. We did do it a joint one with Batavia at the time, so we had some overlapping positions. Not all positions were the same, so that probably did result in some savings. But if you look at the bids that we received, they ranged from up to 81,000, I think was the high bid. So it's not, and I know that there was comment about, well, you gave them their budget, but our budget is open, and that's not unusual. And I think St. Charles did theirs back in August of 2021. So that's a long time when you're talking about consultants' work for this type of work, knowing what the industry is doing and what the marketplace is doing.
And also TRICOM was included in this one, so, TRICOM will pay their portion
What is that roughly? I'm
of
sorry.
it.
Do you
It's
know?
$5,700.
Okay.
So TRICOM will pay that amount for their unrepresented employees.
Are there classifications and stuff being done also, or is that of a
Yes.
lesser?
Yes, it's the same
Okay.
concept.
They just have a
for-
handful of
For
positions.
No, I just wondered if-
positions.
yeah,
And I
okay.
did contact North Aurora because I get, as the HR person here, I get surveys from consultants that are doing this for other communities. So I did get one for North Aurora last fall. So I called them and I said, how much did you pay for it? And so they paid $15,000 for 30 positions. So that's in line with what we're paying here.
How many positions are we really looking at? Just-
We're looking at 68
68.
positions.
Okay, all right, thank you. I don't disagree with the study. I don't. Yeah, it's a little sticker shock, and I'm wondering if now is the right time, or if we should wait a year just to see things settle out, that we may just be a little bit, I'm not sure it's the right time, because I don't think things have settled out, but I don't think it's wrong to do it. Don't get me wrong with that. It's just, I guess we'll never know when the right time is to do it, because we put one off for a while, it sounds like, so, but,
But when we don't do it, then I have
it's farther.
open positions that I
yeah,
can't fill.
it's
I have
it's a
people that are
double-edged sword.
retiring and I can't fill them because it's just out of whack.
You're in a tough position, I know that. I don't disagree with it. But thank you, I do appreciate all the work you did.
Thank you.
Mr. Caven, sir. And then Mr. Bruno.
Thank you. Can you just remind me how long ago the last one was done?
I believe.
Was it 2015,
I believe it was 2017.
17, yeah.
2017? And I know that this was sort of already asked. This one is a little bit more expanded than what was done in 2017, isn't it?
I believe so. The last one, I believe from what I read, was more of a market study. So it was more of contacting the comps and saying, what are you paying for these positions? And then making a market adjustment based on averages.
Okay, and this one's diving a lot further into
This is
job descriptions, classifications.
and looking at the study itself with the different ranges.
Okay,
And it's also reviewing our performance evaluation system, not necessarily like a deep dive, but saying, okay, this looks good per industry standards.
okay, so it is quite a bit more detailed than the one we had done in 2017. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bruno.
Thank you, Mayor. To follow on with Alderman Caven, I do recall from our last conversation, this was much more in-depth. I'm definitely supportive of it. I think it's important for us to stay on top of this and be able to recruit and retain people. Thanks.
Ms. Mayer.
I'm supportive of this because I have seen firsthand how the market's changing right now in the employment of all different roles, from carpenter to executives. And whereas in many years we have not had to pay for this kind of thing because it's easier to get people, it's easier to recruit, it's easier to understand what people want. The world has shifted, and we need to be in a good place as soon as possible to react to it. So I think that while it might be more than what we expected or would like, the money that we invest in this, I would think can pay dividends in people that we get and the talent that they bring to the city. And we have a lot of key roles that are retiring in the coming years, and we should not be behind the curve. That would be a very bad position to be. So I'm very supportive of this, and I hope that it turns out well for the city.
Anyone else from the dais? Ms. Ruby for a second time, unless someone else who has not yet spoken wishes to do so. Ms. Ruby?
Thank you. Just a question about future studies. Is it possible to get back on board with the Geneva, or St. Charles and Batavia to do a joint study again? Can we plan to do that again in the
So-
future?
Again, I don't know what their schedules are. We can always ask. I would note that some cities have different pay philosophies, and St. Charles is one of those. And their philosophy is that they want to be at 75% of market, whereas our philosophy is we want to be at 50% of our comparable market. So that factors into it. But again, yes, we can certainly check that, but I don't know if they do theirs every 3 years, every 7 years, every 10 years. If they don't do theirs for another 5 and did theirs in August 2021, that means we'll be redoing ours in 3 years instead of 5 years.
Right.
To get on the same cycle, or 8 years instead of, so, I mean, it's all, we look at those opportunities, certainly. I'm
Okay.
happy to do so.
All right, and like the 50% versus the 75% example, wouldn't the study outline all of that? Wouldn't it include all those points?
It does, but the recommendations then are totally different.
Okay,
Because the recommendations under a St. Charles guideline is going to be a higher pay range for every position and classification, whereas we're going to be a little bit lower, just because of what we've said. We said we don't, and the council can always change this, but the council previously has said, we want to be in the middle of the pack. We don't want to be the highest paid, we don't want to be the lowest paid, we want to just make sure that we're competitive. St. Charles, on the other hand, has always said, we want to pay the most, regardless,
okay.
so.
So that would factor into any consultant recommendation or any RFP or proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the dais? I'm asking Ms. Dawkins to do a little research.
3,000 is
Okay.
what we estimated.
Got it. Anyone else? Madam Clerk, whenever you're ready.
Kosarog,
Aye.
Maladra,
Aye.
Marks,
Aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Swanson,
Nay.
Bruno,
Aye.
Burghardt,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
Caven,
Aye.
Kilberg,
Aye.
With a vote of 9 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 0 absent, item 11A has been approved by this council. We're jumping to item 12, folks, presentation of ordinances and resolutions. Item 12A, consider resolution number 2023-05, authorizing the city administrator to execute a new stormwater management easement and vacate the original stormwater management easement for the Traxler subdivision. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Bruno makes the motion. Mr. Marks makes the second. Ms. Dawkins.
Okay, so the recommendation to move the drainage easement is to accommodate for the building design and allow for greater flexibility on site. The revised easement continues to provide drainage routing to the relocated wet well detention and complies with the county's stormwater ordinance. I'm not going to say much more on this because, quite frankly, that's not my area of expertise. So we do have Director Babica with us, and I believe we have the applicant as well. So certainly if there are any questions, I will address it to those individuals.
Questions for either? Let's begin with Mr. Babica first. Mr. Maladra, is it? Yeah. Your microphone, sir.
All right. So, Rich, we're making a change to stormwater drainage plan. How can we be sure that this change doesn't change the impact on neighboring properties?
The staff and our city consultant have confirmed that the proposed structures, the dry wells that are being proposed on the west side of the properties, have the same or exceed the capacity of the originally proposed bioswales that were currently proposed to be installed mid-backyard to the middle of the properties. So what the field modification is that basically the on-site facilities have been shifted to the west, to the South 8th Street right-of-way side, and the drainage structures that still feed those detention facilities are still in existence, as well as the discharge structures. Both facilities discharge into a storm sewer that runs along the South 8th Street right-of-way, heads north, crosses underneath Crawford, and then discharges into the Crawford ditch, which then flows east to the existing creek. The original design also followed the same discharge route. It's just where the location of the detention, I shouldn't say detention facilities, where the storage facilities were located. The storage facilities were previously located in the middle of the backyard. Now they're being shifted to the west.
So anything running off the property is running as it did under the old plan? So the amount of water, the timing of the runoff, the direction, none of that's changed?
Correct. The Kane County Stormwater Ordinance requires the applicant to have on-site storage facilities to account for the permeable surface that's being installed. So the rooftops, the sidewalks, the driveways, whatnot. And because that is being accounted for in the storage facility of the two structures that are being installed, the overland flow of the existing ground is still going to follow its natural path. So whatever, if the groundwater landed and flowed to the north because it's not being intercepted by a permeable surface, it's still flowing in that direction.
Mr. Mayor, I know that the neighbor is here, and they have some questions and concerns as well. So if we can give her a chance
Of
at
course.
some point to ask questions, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned, though, the main thing, our responsibility is to make sure that this change doesn't cause any more impact to neighboring properties than was the case under the old plan. And if we're sure that's the case, that's great, but I just want to make sure that we're positive the change is neutral as far as impact on neighbors.
Oops, excuse me. Continuing the questions for Director Babica. Anyone from the dais? Ms. Mayer?
Looking at the plan, it's pretty complicated layout of this easement from what I normally see, which are just rectangles on a page for easements. So am I to assume that this was in response to a very specific plan? Have they submitted plans for approval that then generated this stormwater easement design?
The original design was part of the preliminary engineering.
Okay.
So the city council approved the subdivision with preliminary engineering. As we move through this project to take it to final engineering, the developer as well as their engineer in reviewing the site conditions felt that having a storage facility basically located in the middle of the backyard would preclude them from being able to fully enjoy their property, their rear yard. When you have a drainage easement, you are no longer allowed to build any permanent structures on top of there, and we define a permanent structure even as a sidewalk. So sidewalk, pools, patios, garden sheds, gazebos, fire pits, anything of that nature would not be able to be installed anywhere within the drainage easement. And by relocating it to the front yards, which historically are more or less actively used, other than as green space and landscaping, they're taking advantage of the open space to the west to locate these facilities.
And when you say the facilities, are they doing storm trap modules or pipes? What are the actual structures that are being, is it concrete structures?
No, it's a gravel dry well with an underdrain that discharges into a storm system being installed along the South 8th Street right-of-way.
Okay. And is this two home sites that the subdivision predates me, but I think, is it two home sites?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm good then.
Continuing the questions for Director Babica. Anyone else from the dais?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greg, would you like to introduce your special guest? Oh, yeah, come on up here, Ginger. How are you?
Good to see you. Thanks. Ginger Reynolds from 1 Crawford, which is just next to this development. And the stormwater has been a concern for us because our property lies between the new development and the creek. And so all of the water has to go somewhere, either through us or through drainage to get to the creek. So it's been something that we've been watching and have been concerned about. We didn't know until we saw on the agenda that things had changed. We were happy with the original developer's plans. Then when I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, I think this could be a problem. We haven't had a chance to pay an engineer to reevaluate for us. We know that the city engineer did say it was okay. I can tell you just looking, there's now a fairly substantial berm that the developer put in, probably to block the train, because it's right on the train. A fairly substantial berm that the water will just go straight through the middle of the property, which leads right to my house. Like if you just look at the layout of the land. And so those easements were in that line, so they could hold the water for a while till it could go wherever it needs to go. And now they're on a different side of the property. And so I'm not an engineer either. I don't know, but from the naked eye, it seems very concerning, and we're concerned. So we are ideally, we would love for you all just to say, just put them where they were. That's what everybody agreed to, and it works, and it seems like it will take care of the runoff from this large berm. But if we need to pay someone to get another opinion so that we can bring to you in writing that if indeed the new plan will not do as good a job as the original plan in helping us to disperse that water, then we would like the opportunity we would like some time to be able to engage somebody to do that.
I ask a question? So specifically with the easements that you mentioned in relation to the berm, your concern now is that something's been positioned uphill and water's not going to run uphill, it's going to run downhill.
Faster.
So, faster.
berm.
So, Rich, I don't know if you can help address that. Have we moved something that formerly was in position to catch runoff from the berm that is now no longer in a position to do that?
Do I move? Okay.
I'm actually motioning up for John Green, who's the engineer of record for this project also. The preliminary engineering that was approved through the planning and through staff review did call for a berm alongside the railroad tracks as a screening berm. That has always been there, that still remains there. The structures that are being relocated to the west still have drainage that's taking the roof drains and the gutter drains and whatnot and the sump pumps from the homes and bringing them to the west. The initial structures, even where they were previously located, still had their discharge flow to the west lot line and then to the north and then to the east on the north side of Crawford, on the north side of where Ginger's home is, on 1 Crawford Street. So the discharge points have fundamentally not changed. All that has changed has been the 2 structures. Now, the Kane County Stormwater Ordinance does not require detention facilities for this project because it's too small, but it does require best management practices to accommodate the discharge, the runoff. That is the change between these two, is that we are going from a bioswale, which is basically a heavily landscaped, I don't want to call it ditch, but a swale, a curvature in the ground, which then uses the natural soil and the plants to trap sediments and runoff, which then gets collected into perforated pipe, which then would flow to the west and then discharge eventually to the creek. In lieu of installing one of those structures, they are putting in catch basins. Catch basins are a common structure that are used as a best management practice. It's a recognized best management practice in the Kane County Stormwater Ordinance, which achieves the same thing by filtering the runoff through a gravel bed, a very loose packed gravel bed, which then drains into a perforated pipe, which then drains to the west and through the system. The Kane County Stormwater Ordinance does not require all the runoff to be collected from a site when it does an improvement. That applies to small projects like this. It applies to large projects like the Southeast Industrial Park. What the Kane County Stormwater Ordinance requires, as does the Illinois drainage law, is that if a property that is adjacent to yours is discharging across your property, which this one does, and it is built up through with permeable surface, meaning rooftops or driveways or sidewalks and whatnot, that the velocity or the volume as it flows across your property is the same as it was in a pre-existing condition. The city's consultant has verified that this design meets the Kane County Stormwater Ordinance. They have put their certification they have with the county, which is a significant portion of their business model, as well as the city's business, that this design, as proposed by Engineering Resources, meets or exceeds the Kane County Stormwater Ordinance. Therefore, it complies with the city code. Therefore, we as staff are confident that this revision is going to meet the needs of the city of Geneva.
With that said, Mr. Babica, I would, if no one objects, invite Mr. Green, since you are the chief engineer with respect to this, to speak as well. And then I think someone here had a question. Mr. Marks, do you want to hear from Mr. Green first, or Mr., do you want to?
I think mine's fairly straightforward question.
All yours.
I get it. The basin that's that loosely gravelled rock, who's going to be responsible for that in the future? Is that the city? Is that these two houses? It sounds like that could be something that could cause a problem, so I'm just wondering who's responsible for that going forward. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
As with any other subdivision, once we approach final engineering, then the next phase for us would be to establish an SSA.
So this will have an SSA then? is what
It'll be
we're
a
saying.
dormant SSA as long as it's being properly maintained by the property owners.
Appreciate it, thank you, okay. I didn't know we would do one for a subdivision of two houses, that's why I was clarifying that, thank you. No, it's okay.
Mr. Bruno? Mr. Green, we'll get to you.
Another quick one. Now, presently, this property is uncontrolled. There's nothing but sod as far as stormwater runoff.
Well, it is what we refer to as green space. It's an active construction site as of now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Green, sir, if you'd like. Specifically to Ms. Reynolds' comments and questions?
Sure, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And councilwomen and men. My name is John Green with Engineering Resource Associates. I'm a civil engineer, and I've been involved with the builder and the homeowner, Eric and Valerie Traxler, with respect to this application. So I have prepared the individual site development plans for each property. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of Illinois. I've worked on numerous projects here in Kane County and City of Geneva. And I can testify tonight that the tributary areas are being maintained as originally approved. Number one, we are not changing the discharge direction or location of this project. Frankly, the original design had the dry wells in the backyard, and it was based on a preliminary house layout. So then Eric Traxler had hired an architect and a builder and reconfigured how his pool and house was situated in the backyard, and it just made a lot of sense since all the dry well and all the natural water was draining to the street, towards A Street, to put this underground dry well, which is underneath the front yard landscaping, in the natural direction of water flow. The neighbor had asked about, what about the rear yard? Well, as part of my redesign, I placed a couple of yard drain inlets and catch basins in the backyard. So the dry well that used to be situated in both of these backyards now has a couple of catch basins to collect that water. And then we designed and installed some underground plastic piping to pipe all that backyard water to the front yard to the front yard dry well, where it's held and maintained before it's slowly released into the city public right away. So I have some quick numbers and then I'm finished. The original approved volume for this project that this group approved a couple of years ago was about 1,225 cubic feet of water storage. The current plan that's up for approval tonight accommodates about 10% more. So my current plan went above and beyond and provides 1,402 cubic feet. So I testified that we are maintaining the current directions of flow, and I just summarized that we're providing additional stormwater in excess of the required amounts and in excess of the original approved amounts, and we are protecting the adjacent property owners as regulated by the county and city ordinance. And I have available for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Green from the dais? Ms. Burghardt?
Thank you for being here tonight. You know, what recompense or what you know, choice does Ginger have if this doesn't work like you expect, or the property owners don't keep up the system and allow it to fall into disrepair? I guess we have the SSA would pick up that, but.
Sure.
I guess I understand that they want to use their backyard, but you know, I have to feel for the homeowner who's already there and is very nervous about what this change means for their
Before I
property.
answer your question, let me answer it one. The dry well used to be in the backyard, but the discharge drained out to the 8th Street right away anyway. So there is no change in discharge towards Ginger's property. So the water always drained towards 8th Street where the homes are built. And the dry wells were situated in the backyard, and now they've been moved to the front, but that's where the water does drain to. So I can testify as a professional engineer that there is no changes to the adjacent property owner to the east whatsoever, because all of the new impervious runoff created by the rooftops and patios, sidewalks, and driveways drains the natural direction, which is towards the 8th Street right away.
What is this designed to hold? Like, we talk about 100-year storms and that sort of thing, like.
1¼ inches of rainfall over the area of proposed new impervious. So the project as a whole is planned and estimated to have approximately 14,000 square feet of impervious area. Mr. Traxler's house that was just recently constructed has approximately 6,000 square feet of impervious. So there's an additional 8,000 square feet in the kitty for the second house on the north lot. And if that house were to exceed that kitty amount, any new house plan will be submitted to the building department and reviewed by staff and sent to WBK, the city's consultant, to make sure that there's compliance with the code, with the current code of that time. So if the home were to exceed the allotment, a permit will not be released by city staff and their stormwater expert consultant until they comply with the Kane County ordinance.
So the house would have to be made smaller?
Well, the house is allowed to meet the lot coverage and FAR requirements, but assuming the zoning impacts are acceptable, the dry well would be made larger.
Okay, and that could be done?
Anytime.
At any time.
And if that was necessary, there would be an amendment or an additional stormwater easement needed to make the easement that's shown on Lot 1, the north lot, maybe slightly larger. That's not necessarily definitely a requirement, because perhaps the dry well could be dug a little deeper, but there are some options. So the main reason we're here tonight is a condition of Mr. Traxler's occupancy permit is to get this easement situation cleaned up. The city staff was wonderful with us and allowed construction to begin. Construction's just about finished. Mr. Traxler is in the house on a temporary certificate of occupancy, and this is just a housekeeping issue that's before you tonight.
You said, was it an inch and a quarter per, I mean,
Oh.
in layman's terms, what, I
Oh,
mean,
sorry.
is this supposed to
Yeah.
handle like a?
It handles a reasonable and customary afternoon rain, an inch and a quarter of rain. You know, it's probably a rainstorm that we have once every 3 months or so, 4 months or so. You're used to civil engineers like myself standing up here talking about a 100-year storm event. That's 11 inches of rainfall. So we're not talking about stormwater detention here. This is volume control best management practices, which is a new aspect to the Kane County ordinance that was just adopted in 2019. And its intention is not for volumetric control like you're asking, but its intention is for water quality. You heard us describe that there is no detention pond with retaining walls around it like we see on all our large commercial structures, on all our commercial properties along Randall Road. This detention facility is not about volume. It's about collecting all the property owner's impervious area, their driveway, their sidewalks, where the pollutants might be, the herbicides, the pesticides, the rock salt, and draining that into an aggregate pit in the ground. In Mr. Traxler's case, in his front yard, he's already paid his builder to construct a 25-foot square by 3-foot deep hole in the ground, excavated all the dirt out, wrapped it in geofabric, and filled it with 3-inch rock. Why 3-inch rock? 3-inch rock has a 35% air void ratio, and that inch and a quarter of water gets stored in all those air voids, and it sits there for a couple of days. Why does it sit there? Because standing pooling water, if there are contaminants in it, filter out. And it protects our streams, our rivers, and our lakes, and all the contaminants flush out. They use God's green earth to work as a natural filtration system. And then once the dry well is filled with water, it overflows out, kind of like a gravy or a grease separator would work. It would let the contaminants filter out and then discharge clean water into our lakes and rivers.
So has this project already been done before it came to us tonight?
Yes.
Is that unusual? I'm sorry, so you're saying the construction work has already been done in the front
Yes, this is kind of
yard?
a procedural cleanup item. It's a housekeeping item. The city engineering staff and the city engineering consultant approved all my work back in September and October of 2021.
And the original plan, did it go before planning and zoning was approved? The water management, was that before planning and zoning first?
Yeah. The original project was a 2-lot subdivision, so planning and zoning saw the project,
As did the council.
as did the
And then
council.
the council, but this is
Not-
just coming to us.
Not with the specifics of what we're here tonight to talk about, but with the specifics of, can 2 homes be constructed in this location? It got that far in the process with just preliminary engineering design. The preliminary engineering design just required representative home footprints placed on each lot. Once it was approved and Mr. Traxler knew there was really going to be a project, then he hired an architect and designed the house he really wanted to build. And so now this is just a field change modification. Again, from the numbers I quoted you, we're meeting or exceeding all the volumes. We just moved it over a little bit.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kosarog, then Mr. Maladra, then Mr. Swanson.
This question could be for you, since you're working closely with the owner. Is there a real urgency here? Is he going to do it Monday, Tuesday, do the excavation and everything that
Oh,
he's
it's already constructed.
So this pit is already constructed?
Yes,
This is done?
yes. It's been
So
approved
what-
by.
And the topic is really just about the easement. So we're theoretically, we're supposed to discuss just the easement, not necessarily size of the home, et cetera, but this easement that has been called into question respectfully, that's what we're talking about. Whether this easement, as Mr. Green explained, meets the discharge speed and rate so that it works effectively based on Kane County ordinance and based on what Mr. Babica said with respect to our own ordinance reflecting the Kane County guidelines.
Correct.
So Brad, the floor is still yours.
Well, I guess what I was going to get at was giving Ms. Reynolds a chance to do her research, which is what I heard her asking us to do. So I guess that's why I'm a little confused where we are in it. I do get the easement, and I got that it's done. I guess, I don't know. I guess I still, even though it's a housekeeping issue, and I don't know, logically, it seems to make sense, I'd still like to give Ms. Reynolds the opportunity a week or two to do her research and make sure she's comfortable with her neighbors. I mean, that's, if this is just a housekeeping issue, I don't see what the rush would be anyway. If it's already done, it's done. Let's just give her the opportunity to do whatever she does and come back in 2 weeks and figure it out. That's my thought here, instead of getting into the weeds of all the stormwater management in King County and all that. Just make sure the neighbors are comfortable with what's happening here. I think it's a lot more simple than maybe we're making it out to be. Thank you.
Mr. Maladra, then Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, Brad just covered most of what I was going to bring up. It seems to me that what we're dealing with is mostly an issue of a change has been made, and we need to give people the opportunity to get acclimated to that change. They accepted the original plan. If this is really not an impactful change, I'm confident that they'll understand the current plan. The plan is built, and we'll move forward. So I also would give them some extra time.
Anything else, sir? Mr. Swanson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question would be, will there be a time period where we would evaluate this and then authorize a certificate of completion at the end, similar to what we're doing in the next items? Would there be a year period that we would evaluate this, whether it's working properly?
There's a two-step process with accepting any public improvement. The first step is issuing a certificate of completion and then a certificate of acceptance. So the first one is an acknowledgement to the developer that all the required public improvements have been installed and everything is functioning appropriately. And then they go into a 12-month maintenance period, which allows for any deficiencies, discrepancies, or workmanship issues to arise, which would include any design issues that come about. And then at the end of that 12-month period, all the public improvements are again re-inspected by city staff. And then we make a recommendation to the city council to formally accept the public improvements, and then they're ours in perpetuity.
So the neighboring homeowner would have an option to rectify a situation if it was going poorly over that.
Well, the
time
process
period.
would work is that as part of our inspections, if there were ongoing issues, we would expect the adjacent property owners to contact professional staff to express their concerns, and then we would follow up.
Okay. I agree, too, that we should allow the neighboring homeowner to be comfortable with the changes. I would like to make a motion that we give a 2-week extension for this and come back in 2 weeks, a date certain, our next city council meeting.
Next committee of the whole meeting would be February the 6th.
Okay, which would be 3 weeks. And that would give Ginger time to evaluate the situation and hopefully come to agreement, so.
Right, the motion on the floor from Alderman Swanson is to postpone decision on this matter until the city council meeting of February 6th. Is there a second?
Can I talk again?
After we consider this first.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kosarog. Regarding the motion, first the dais, then I'll invite Ms. Reynolds to comment from the dais. Any questions about the motion? Ms. Ruby?
I actually just wanted to hear from Ms. Reynolds to see if she is interested in this offer, and whatever expenditures that may entail for her.
Anyone else on the dais? Ms. Mayor?
I think that we're stalling out a process that we don't need to stall out here, that there's plenty of time for Ms. Reynolds to study the plan before the inspections are final, before the SSA is established, that I think that the Kane County stormwater management program is pretty restrictive, and if our licensed engineer is designed to that we should all feel comfortable that our staff and the licensed engineer has reviewed it thoroughly. I just feel like we don't need to wait 2 weeks to do this, and there are points in the process where a review could happen.
From the dais on the motion, Mr. Kilberg, then Mr. Bruno.
I think the summary here is simply, they're going to be neighbors for a lot longer than 3 weeks. So if we're looking at building a good relationship between neighbors, I think the appropriate thing, has been pointed out already, is to give them some additional time. Since it's all, as Alderman Kosarak pointed out, it's already completed, and I'm not anticipating an inch and a half of rain. Maybe we'll get about 10 inches of snow, but I don't think we're going to get an inch and a half of rain here over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I think the time to give the neighbor to the project an opportunity to make an assessment. And again, nothing may change, but I think that there's some peace of mind, and I think that that'll foster a better relationship between the two parties. So that's my position on this.
Mr. Bruno, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I fairly closely mirror the thoughts of Alderperson Mayor. But I would be interested in, the homeowner has a temporary occupancy already, so did I hear that there?
That's what was stated.
So I'm trying to think what the hardship is here. I'm fully confident if, a professional engineer says this meets or exceeds what was there before, it seems undue to have to delay it. If final inspection won't happen for quite a while, so I think I don't see that there's a need to delay it. I think there's plenty of opportunity for analyzing it during construction, and if it ends up being unsatisfactory, that's on Mr. Traxler, I suppose. Thank you.
Anyone else on the dais on the motion, which is to postpone this matter until the 6th of February at the City Council meeting? No one else on the dais? I'm certainly happy to invite Ms. Reynolds to the podium. Welcome back.
Thanks. So, just so that I'm sure I understand what's going on, there actually is no opportunity to do something different. Is that what I'm hearing? It's already done, and just want to be clear.
The short answer is, should upon inspection, as a result of a concern or a complaint that things ain't working like they're supposed to, our professional staff will review that information, do an inspection on that site, and should there be an issue, then it is incumbent upon Mr. Green and his team to fix or remedy that situation to our staff's satisfaction and, of course, consistent with the Kane County Stormwater Management. And that period lasts, as Mr. Babica explained, through certificate of completion and then ultimately certificate of acceptance. It's approximately a 12-month period.
So, as background,
Yes.
during construction, there was a river that came down through my house, through my yard. And I called the city, and they said, no, there isn't. There's no problem. It's fine. So I went out and took pictures of literally this river. So the city told me I was wrong. The staff told me I was wrong. I took pictures of a river flowing, and then they said, oh, now we see that actually they had emptied the basement into what ended up being into your yard just after a rain. So that was the river. And then it happened again because there was a burst pipe in the construction. So there was another river, which I guess all that to say that we do not have, I'll be frank, faith that if we call and say there's a problem, that we will get a fair hearing about that. There were really big, they dug the basement and they left all of they left big hills of, I'd never seen that in a construction site. So all that water was coming down, and so we were concerned about that. It was all coming down, and staff told us it wasn't a problem. So all this to say, I at least want you to know that this has been a really frustrating process. And then to have not been, to have expressed our concern about the water coming down since the beginning of this project to the Traxlers, to staff, to Mr. DeGroot, to our aldermen who have actually been terrific. And then to see this on the agenda was concerning, like, wait, something has changed and we were comfortable and now we're not. Can we find out more about this? And then to find out that actually it's already done. Knowing that now our recourse is to call staff who have not been willing to believe that we've had a problem in the past, it's really not, it's very unsettling and hasn't been a good experience. So I don't have any desire to spend, I don't know what it costs to get it reviewed, but if it's already done, and if it wouldn't matter because you all have decided that your processes are what you're going to follow, then I don't need to go spend $500 or whatever it is, just for my own peace of mind. But I'm very disappointed in this process. I'm very disappointed and we're talking about, potentially thousands of dollars in damages to if we have more than an afternoon rain, I don't know, and it all comes to my house from these two new sites, because it used to be a whole acre of land that all of the water came down on, and now there will be 2 houses there, and I know that there are gutters, and it's worrisome. So I guess my bottom line is if nothing will change, and then I don't need the extra time, I don't want to spend the money, but I would love your assistance in figuring out if there is a problem, how I can actually get someone to pay attention to it and not run into, by that time, if there is a problem, then it will probably be $1,000 worth of damage. But I would love your assistance in figuring out how to do this differently moving forward. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Swanson, sir.
If I could just say, this body would be approving the certificate of acceptance. So if there is a problem, you certainly can address us again and certainly reach out to your alderman. And we would be happy to assist you and certainly would take that into consideration before we approve a certificate of acceptance. So yes, it does matter. I just wanted you to know that. Thank you.
Anyone else from the dais on this matter, which is the motion to postpone this issue until the council meeting on Monday, February the 6th? Mr. Swanson?
Could I retract the motion, given that it's no longer necessary?
Basically, motion to withdraw.
Yeah, motion to withdraw.
Motion to withdraw.
Yeah. Seconder concurs?
Kazarag.
Or actually, Kosrak? Second? Okay. There is no motion on the floor, ladies and gentlemen. The only matter on the floor is item number 12A, as presented in the eloquent and efficient statement I made earlier. Any questions regarding the main motion? It's a tough crowd tonight, Vicky. On the main motion, ladies and gentlemen, item 12A, the original motion was offered by Mr. Bruno, seconded by Mr. Marks. Madam Recording Secretary / Clerk, please take the roll.
Bruno?
Aye.
Burkhart? Nay. Ruby?
Nay.
Caven?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Kasserag?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
Mayor?
Aye.
Swanson?
Aye.
8 votes in the affirmative to approve this matter, 2 in the negative, 0 absent. The motion has been approved by this council. Ms. Reynolds, thank you very much. And Mr. Green and your team, thank you. And Mr. Babica, of course, thank you, sir. Item 12B, as in boy, consider resolution number 2023-06, authorizing a certificate of acceptance for Fabian Crossing Fresh Time. Motion by Mr. Kilberg, seconded by Mr. Marks. Ms. Dawkins.
Okay, so I'm actually going to do item B and C together only because they're similar, and then we'll do D, E, and F when we get to those. But as Mr. Babica indicated earlier, this is now for a certificate of acceptance. The first item is for Fabian Crossings Fresh Time. All public improvements have been completed and in operation for over 36 months. And the item relates to the, for the second item, it relates to the water main and electric improvements for the Oberweis project. And a site review has confirmed that all of those public improvements were completed and acceptable. I would say this is really housekeeping because these are ones that I think should have come a while ago, but with staff turnover and other things, they just kind of got missed. So we do have City Engineer Brian Davids with us if you have any additional questions on either of those certificates of acceptance.
Are there any questions from Mr. Davids from this council? We, of course, are talking about item 12B as in boy. We'll consider item 12C separately, although they are relatively well-connected. If not, I'll entertain a vote on this. Kilberg made the motion. Marks made the second. Ms. Clerk, whenever you're ready.
All right. Kilberg,
Kilberg, aye.
Kasserag,
Aye.
Maladra,
Aye.
Marks,
Aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Swanson,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Burkhart,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
Caven.
Aye.
With 10 votes in the affirmative, 0 votes in the negative, and 0 absent, item 12B has been accepted by this council. Item 12C, consider resolution number 2023-07, authorizing a certificate of acceptance for Fabian Crossing, Oberweis. Mr. Marks makes the motion. Mr. Kosarog makes the second. Please heed Ms. Dawkins' comments earlier.
All right. Marks,
Those of you not lactose intolerant, please take the roll.
Marks,
Aye.
Mayor, Swanson,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Burkhart,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
Caven,
Aye.
Kilberg,
Aye.
Kasserag,
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
10 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 absent. Item 12C has been approved by this council. Item 12D, consider resolution number 2023-08, authorizing a certificate of completion for Cooper Woods. Is there a motion? Mr. Marks makes the motion. Mr. Swanson makes the second. Ms. Dawkins.
Okay, so as I indicated, the next three items are all related to a certificate of completion for Cooper Woods, Emma's Landing, and Greenhouse Point developments. Each resolution indicates what public improvements have been completed and the recommended reduction in bond amount, which serves as a one-year warranty. And again, we still have our city engineer with us this evening if you have any questions.
Any questions from the dais for Mr. Davids regarding item 12D, as in David? How convenient. If not, Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Marks,
Aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Swanson,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Burkhart,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
Caven,
Aye.
Kilberg,
Aye.
Kasserag,
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Item 12D has been approved with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 council members absent. On to 12E, consider resolution number 2023-09, authorizing a certificate of completion for Emma's Landing. Is there a motion? Mr. Marks makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Bruno, was that, makes the second? Again, heed the comments made by Ms. Dawkins just a moment ago. Any questions for Mr. Davids? Madam Clerk, whenever you're ready, please take the roll.
Marks,
Aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Swanson,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Burkhart,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
Caven,
Aye.
Kilberg,
Aye.
Kasserag,
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
With a vote of 10 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 absent, item 12E, as in Emma's Landing, has been approved. Item 12F, consider resolution number 2023-10, authorizing a certificate of completion for Greenhouse Point. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Kosarog makes the motion. Ms. Mayer makes the second. Again, the comments earlier by Ms. Dawkins still stand. Any questions from Mr. Davids? Madam Clerk?
Kasserag,
Aye.
Maladra,
Aye.
Marks,
Aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Swanson,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Burkhart,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
Caven,
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
With a vote of 10 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 absent. Item 12F, as in fantastic, was approved. We're down to item 13, folks, new business and public comment. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council with a question or a comment? I trust there's nobody online. From the dais, any new business for the benefit of the council and the community? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the city council meeting. Motion by Alderman Marks. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned, and we'll just take a brief 45-minute break before the committee of the whole meeting.
Both of these. All right. Good evening. I'd like to call the January 17th Committee of the Whole meeting to order, please. My name's Craig Maladra. I'm one of the aldermen from the 5th Ward, a responsibility I share with Alderman Swanson. Let the record show that all members of the committee are present. Following the agenda, item 2, recommends suspending the rules to permit Councilmember Maladra to chair this meeting and to vote on all action items on this agenda.
Second.
Second by Bruno. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I dare you. All right. Item 3, approve regular committee of the whole minutes from December 19th, 2022. Do I have a motion? So moved. Marks and Mayor. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. No. Okay, item 4, items of business. There's just one tonight, and it's a big one. Presentation and discussion regarding the fiscal year 2024 budget and the fiscal year 2025 budget projections. Do I need a motion to put this on the floor?
No,
Nope.
just a presentation, no action.
Okay, so we have a presentation from Administrator Goff.
Thank you. So while Craig said this is a big item, it is a big item, but tonight there are no big decisions being made. As is our traditional practice, we will give you present a general overview of the budget. The numbers were all in your packet that was out on the city's website as of Friday. And then after my presentation, there will be time to entertain some questions, but there will also be time before the budget actually is adopted to ask more questions and have more discussion and debate. So, like I said, tonight's presentation is an overview of the recommended fiscal year 2024 budget and a forecast of the 25 budget. The intent is to provide a general overview, not just for the City Council, but for the public. We recognize that you may have some specific questions based upon your review, but first we wanted to provide some context for the numbers. This slide outlines kind of the discussion for this evening. As you can see, our theme is building our future, and I think as we go through the budget, you'll see why I selected building our future as the theme. Tonight, we will review the budget process, provide a brief review of fiscal year 23, review guiding principles in preparing this budget, recap the fiscal year 24 strategic plan priorities identified by the City Council, and then provide an overview of the recommended budget and the various funds that are contained therein. Lastly, we will review the budget calendar and next steps. I would respectfully request that you save your questions for the end. Also, alternatively, you can submit your questions in writing as we've done in the past so that we can provide a more thorough response, and those would be posted on the city's website for all to see and read. So first, our budget process began in earnest in November of 2022. This is with our strategic planning workshop, and the City Council, the chairwoman from the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee, and the senior management team were all in attendance. Following that meeting, following the meeting, the council at the meeting votes on their strategic plan priorities, which we'll talk about, and then following that, the departments submitted their draft budgets to the city administrator and the finance director for review. The draft before you this evening is the culmination of the strategic planning workshop and the budget meetings with staff. The public hearing and anticipated final adoption of the recommended budget is set for February 6th, 2023 at the City Council meeting. So before we talk about where we're going, it's usually a good idea to look at where we have been. Fiscal year '23 was challenging from a budgeting standpoint because there were so many unknowns. The unemployment rate was, and actually still is, at an all-time low, creating the pressure on the ability to hire and retain qualified applicants. And inflation was at an all-time high, although I would say we are seeing a little bit of relief there. These factors increased the cost of doing business. Fuel costs were higher than anticipated and unpredictable. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but there were also many disruptions to the supply chain. Many projects and equipment purchases were put on hold because the costs far exceeded the budget and/or the vehicles and equipments just weren't available. But the news for fiscal year '23 was not all doom and gloom. Fiscal year '23 saw revenues higher than those pre-COVID, and while we are still cautious and conservative in our budgeting, the increased revenues are providing an opportunity for us to invest in our future. As you've heard me state before, the budget is a planning document. Many often mistakenly believe that the budget is a forecast of the amount the local government expects to spend. While that may be true, the reality is that the budget is the maximum amount that is allowed to be spent absent an approved amendment. As such, expenditures at the end of a fiscal year may be below the budgeted amount. This is by design. It is not that the budget is padded, but rather that the expenditures were within the budgeted plan of expenditures. It is for this reason that as you look through the budget, I caution a comparison between projected expenditures and the proposed budget. A more realistic comparison is budget to budget, especially considering that as of today, we are only 75% through fiscal year 2023. And as we've learned over the past several years, a lot can happen in a very short period of time. I don't think I have to remind you that in fiscal year 22 budget, right, or 21, my years are all messed up, but literally we passed the budget and it was less than a month later that the world shut down. So again, we're only 75%, so I just keep that in mind as you're looking at those projected expenses and where we think we're going to end the year. On the screen, I listed some other guiding principles when it comes to formulating a budget. Some of the things that we kept in mind as staff, we want to ensure that we're recruiting and retaining a great workforce. We want to be able to absorb within our budget while also maintaining our high level of service, inflation, expenses associated with unfunded mandates, future budget's annual maintenance and operational needs. We want to use municipal resources effectively, and we want to ensure that we can invest in our future through an aggressive capital program that includes not only facilities, but equipment and infrastructure. So as stated, the budget process begins in earnest with strategic planning. Following the conclusion of this workshop, the City Council and SPAC Chair get to vote on their priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. So in that voting, there were two distinct tiers that came out on top. So Tier 1, which had the most votes, are these three that you see here. Excellent Municipal Services 2, which talks about having infrastructure and facilities necessary to maintain efficient and reliable public services. Economic Vitality 2, which is about our local economy and having a new commercial and industrial opportunities to expand our tax base. And Environmental Stewardship 2, to take actions to promote long-term sustainability. The Tier 2 priorities that came out of that meeting were encouraging tourism, quality of life, that we respect all people of all ages, backgrounds, abilities, and ethnicities, and quality of life. We want to promote active lifestyles and physical well-being while ensuring a safe environment. So I would note that these two tiers are what were forefront when we were developing the budget, but just because a strategic plan objective wasn't prioritized doesn't mean that it goes away and doesn't mean that we forget about it. What it means is that these are the first ones we look to as priorities, and then as resources and staff time allows, we also fill in with the other objectives that are still contained within that same strategic plan. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the general fund, as this is typically the the most interesting one of them all. There are various roles and responsibilities associated with the creation, preparation, and adoption of the budget. The budget officer, which by our city code is myself, the city administrator, recommends a budget based upon the principles identified earlier, the general operational and capital needs of the city, and ensures that the recommended budget is balanced. That means revenues either equal or exceed expenditures. It's the city council that has the sole authority by a majority vote to adopt the annual budget. And since the budget is a planning document and ultimately things can and do change, the city council also has the authority to amend the budget by a 2/3 vote. The city council should be proud of the work they have accomplished over the past several years. The city is on solid financial footing based upon decisions and actions taken by the council. An AA2 rating from Moody's and recognition by the Government Finance Officers Association for the city's efforts in budgeting and financial reporting is evidence of this. The general fund projections based upon year-end estimates and fiscal year 24 proposed budget indicate that the city will maintain a fund balance exceeding the goal of at least 90 days operating expenditures in compliance with the city's financial policies. This is the result of the City Council making a concerted effort following the Great Recession and COVID-19 to position the city with the resources to provide the flexibility to meet unexpected costs and position the city to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. In addition, the city is now in a position to make significant investments in facilities, equipment, and infrastructure. Even with inflation and reduced purchasing power, the city is well positioned due to prudent planning and strategic thinking. This slide provides a summary of the general fund. Revenues are budgeted at an amount 17% more than what was budgeted for fiscal year 23, but only 5% more than the projected revenues. This includes the planned use of over $1 million from the fund balance, which is in your line items you'll see is called reappropriation, and we are currently forecasting that revenues will increase another 3.2% in fiscal year 2025. So our familiar charts that we show every year, this shows the general fund revenues on the left and the general fund expenditures on the right. The recommended 24 budget does not anticipate any new full-time positions to be added. It is, however, contemplated that the administrative intern position, which was recently vacated in the city administrator's office, will be converted to a part-time sustainability position with no additional budgetary impact. From an operational perspective, there are several unfunded mandates that will require ongoing expenses that will be explained later in this presentation. In addition, as discussed during the strategic planning workshop, an economic development tourism grant program is contemplated. A policy discussion outlining this program is anticipated to be presented to the council in the near future. And lastly, the major highlight of the general fund budget are the transfer to capital funds, which will also be explained on a later slide. As most of you are aware, the general fund derives nearly 75% of its revenue from three major sources. These sources are sales tax, which includes the non-home rule sales tax, property tax, and state income tax. The city receives 2% of the 8% sales tax collected. 1.5% of that, which is unrestricted. This is the largest source of revenue for the general fund, whereas the other 0.5% is restricted to the infrastructure capital fund. As depicted on the chart, sales tax revenue has increased substantially over the past few years. This is primarily the result of the Leveling the Playing Field Act, or what we call the Amazon tax, that went into effect in January of 2021. So when you look at this chart, you see the jump kind of took place really in fiscal year 2022. That was the first full year that we realized the revenue from this Leveling the Playing Field Act. Property taxes are collected on the assessed valuation of taxable real personal property. As the chart shows, the total assessed valuation in Geneva has increased steadily since 2018. The estimated assessed valuation for 2022 shows an increase of 4.9% over 2021. The tax levy rate is used to calculate property taxes. This rate peaked in 2015 at roughly 75 cents per $100 of EAV and has been on a downward trend due to the decrease in required debt service payments. Final debt service payments were made in fiscal year '22 for general obligation bonds attributed to the general fund. As such, the estimated tax rate for 2022 is 0.5123, or a 1.8% increase. To put this in perspective, a resident in a home valued at $350,000 will pay approximately $570 annually in property taxes to the city. I'll repeat that, $570 annually to the city. Property taxes account for $5.8 million in revenue to the general fund, or roughly 24%, and of that, $200,000, an increase of $22,000 over fiscal year 2023, is in the mental health fund. Again, a little perspective. The general fund portion of the property tax levy equates to approximately the operational cost of the fire department. So when we talk about the general fund, the departments contained within are your police, your fire, public works, save for the utilities, so it's engineering, it's streets, it's fleets, and then your general government, community development, economic development, finance. All of those functions come in the general fund, but property taxes, if we only collected property taxes and didn't have sales tax, it would literally only fund one department. So while each fund within the city budget stands on its own, some funds receive funding from a transfer from the general fund. This slide shows the recommended transfers to miscellaneous funds. Transfers to the Cultural Arts Commission, Beautification Committee, and the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee are consistent with the funding that was provided in fiscal year 2023. There's a new transfer contemplated to SSA number 1, which is to keep the fund whole as we enter into the final year of the SSA. Work is currently underway analyzing the options for renewal of SSA 1 upon its expiration. Transfers to the city's various capital funds are recommended at $3.8 million for 2024 and forecasted at $3.7 million for 2025. Total transfers, so miscellaneous funds and the capital funds, account for 16% of the general fund budget. So in other words, 16% of our expenditures in the general fund are actually money that we're transferring out of the general fund to help fund capital and some of these miscellaneous committees. While the general fund accounts for most governmental operations, there are 36 other funds that comprise the city's budget. Over the next few slides, I will provide a brief overview of some of these funds. The American Rescue Plan Act, or affectionately known as the ARPA Fund. This was signed into law on March 11th, 2021 as the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. It provided $350 billion in additional funding for state and local governments. The City of Geneva was a beneficiary of this law. The city received $2.9 million received in two tranches, one in September of 2022 and one in September of 2021. These funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, which is our fiscal year 25, and expended no later than December 31st, 2026. Some of the planned uses or identified uses for in the 24 budget would be for lead line replacements. That's not just the service line, but also the water main, what we talked a little bit about last week. Facility improvements, stormwater and drainage projects, and downtown reinvestment and infrastructure improvements. The city has three main capital funds, excluding those contained within enterprise funds. Page 100 in this evening's agenda packet lists all of the capital improvement programs by fund. The General Capital Projects Fund contemplates the majority of expenditures, 43%, to be on facility-related improvements, design and planning projects. Revenue for this fund includes the $1.5 million transfer from the general fund and a $75,000 transfer from the ARPA fund. And then the remainder would be by using fund reserves. And when I talk about fund reserves, it's just the reserves that are in this particular fund. This is a fund that we don't necessarily keep a fund reserve because it's annually it changes as to what the projects are, so there's really not a need to have a large fund balance here. Whereas we'll talk about in the equipment fund, you might want to keep a fund balance. So these are mindful uses of the fund reserve. The Infrastructure Capital Projects Fund, which you see in the center there, is funded primarily from the 5% non-home rule sales tax that is restricted to infrastructure projects. For the first time, or at least the first time in a long time, this budget contemplates a transfer of $500,000 from the general fund. There's also a $1.4 million transfer from the motor fuel tax fund and $220,000 from ARPA. Annual programs, which are things like sidewalk improvements, street program, et cetera, make up 43% of the contemplated expenditures. Of note for fiscal year 2024 is that storm, sewer, and drainage projects make up 15% of planned expenditures. And lastly, you have the Capital Equipment Fund, which receives the bulk of its revenue from a transfer from the general fund. For fiscal year 2024, it is anticipated that the majority of this budget anticipates expenditures for vehicles, equipment, and machinery. This is the result of many anticipated purchases in fiscal year 2023 that were delayed due to those supply chain disruptions we talked about. As such, the recommended budget includes funding for purchases anticipated to have occurred in fiscal year 2023, and then those additional purchases that were scheduled for 2024. Similar to the general fund slide, this slide represents the revenues on the left and the expenditures on the right for the electric fund. The majority of revenue is derived from the sale of electricity. For fiscal year 2024, expenditures are almost equally split, with 42% going towards capital projects, including the bonding for a new substation, and the rest related to the administration, operations, and maintenance of the utility. I would note that the current recommended budget does not include additional revenue related to rate adjustments as discussed at the January 9th Special Committee of the Whole. Absent this rate adjustment, though, capital expenditures that are budgeted and the policy relating to fund balance would need to be reviewed and revised. Again, the pie chart on the left is related to the revenue and the chart on the right to expenditures of the water and wastewater fund. Similar to electric, the majority of revenue is derived from water and sewer sales, and the expenditures are fairly equally split between capital investments and the production, treatment, and distribution and collection of water and wastewater. The capital projects identified for the Water Wastewater Division are based on the rate adjustment analysis presented at the January 9th Special Committee of the Whole. The revenue, however, does not currently reflect any adjustment. Similar to the electric division, absent a rate adjustment, capital projects and the fund balance policy would need to be reviewed. Current recommended budgeted capital expenditures include the design of a secondary sanitary sewer river crossing and the wastewater treatment plant solids handling improvement design engineering, along with water main infrastructure replacement project and other miscellaneous projects related to water and wastewater. So you've heard me mention unfunded mandates. The fiscal year 2024 recommended budget is no different than previous budgets in that it has to include various unfunded mandates. Some of these are in the form of capital projects, and others will be ongoing operational line items. An unfunded mandate is a statute or regulation that requires the city to perform certain actions with no money provided for fulfilling the requirement. It should be noted that although I bring these unfunded mandates to your attention, it does not mean that we disagree with the spirit of the mandate. Rather, it is so that you recognize that the costs that must be carried to carry out those objectives. This slide provides some examples of the unfunded mandates that have been included in the recommended and forecast budgets. The column on the left represents those items that will be ongoing operational expenses, and the column on the right represents those items that are one-time capital expenses. So to give you an example, CDL license training, that's now an operational expense of $4,000 that we didn't used to have in the budget, but that we are required to provide that training for our CDL drivers. Police body cameras, that's roughly a $70,000 expenditure that's ongoing because it's leasing, I believe we're leasing the cameras, and then it's the storage of all the data and what you do with the data. So that's why those are an operational, because you're going to see those expenses year after year. The capital ones, again, are a one-time, one-off expense. So the fuel dispensing system, we need to upgrade that. So we're looking in the capital, there's $300,000 allotted for that expenditure. Garbage dumpster covers, sounds like a good idea. Again, we don't disagree with the spirit of it, but they're now required that if you have a big dumpster, you have to have one of those covers, for lack of a better phrase, over it. So those were just some of the examples. So as indicated, the presentation tonight is meant to give you an introduction to the recommended fiscal year 2024 budget and the fiscal year 2025 forecast. The line item detail of each fund is contained within the packet for you to peruse at your leisure. When looking at the city's total fiscal year 2024 budget of all funds, again, as I said, there are 37 different funds, operating expenses, which are contractual and commodities, represent about 38.5% of all expenses. Capital projects represent about 36.8%. And personnel expenses, which are wages and benefits, make up 24.7% of the city's total budget. This slide represents all funds contained within the city's total budget. The fiscal year 2024 recommended budget anticipates total expenditures in the amount of $128 million. The forecast for fiscal year 2025 is $112.8 million, which is similar to the fiscal year 2023 budget, as it is anticipated that capital spending will reduce slightly. I'll say it again, I've said it before. The budget is a planning document. It outlines the maximum expenditures. The budget presented to you this evening is a balanced budget where all funds expenditures are less than or equal to anticipated revenues, including the use of fund balance where appropriate and planned. The city's fiscal position, due to our continued responsible approach to budgeting and forecasting, is anticipated to remain stable throughout the current fiscal year and upon conclusion of fiscal year 2024 and beyond. I would like to close out this presentation by thanking those who helped put the budget together for your consideration. First, I would like to acknowledge and thank our senior management team and their respective staff for working together to put together a fiscally sound budget for your review and consideration. I don't know why they're all sitting on that side of the room, but there they are. Through the efforts of all, we are able to present to you a balanced budget that represents the values stated in the strategic plan and best serves the citizens of this community. The recommended budget, as presented this evening, is available to the public and on the city's website. This presentation will also be uploaded to the city's website tomorrow, so anybody can look at it at their leisure as well. In addition, we have set aside time at next Monday's special committee of the whole meeting to provide the City Council with additional time for discussion and review. A special committee of the whole meeting may also be scheduled for January 30th if desired. Lastly, on February 6th, at the City Council meeting, there will be a public hearing on the budget, and the City Council will be asked to consider and approve a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024 budget that same evening. Again, I recognize a lot of information was presented not only in my talk, but in the packet. I don't remember how many pages it is, but it was significant. So tomorrow we will be providing, or I say tomorrow, certainly this week we'll be providing the council with the Excel spreadsheets. So if you want to do your own calculations, and some variance reports also to assist in your review. But essentially, as we've done in the past, I would encourage the council to submit any questions in writing to me, as you see on the screen. If you submit them by noon on Friday, we will have them posted by Monday afternoon, that following Monday. I think this process has worked well in the past because what it does is it allows staff the opportunity to be thoughtful in the response and make sure we're answering the question that's being asked. But secondly, it also allows the public to see and review and read those and be able to refer back and forth to the budget document. So I thank you for your time this evening, your leadership and support. At this point, I'm going to return the floor to Mayor Pro Tem Maladra, Chair of the meeting, to entertain any questions you might have tonight or make any comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, we'll open up the floor to questions. Rich?
I'll wait for Stephanie to get to her seat. Just
Give her a chance.
Yeah, give her a chance. That's fine. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the budget. Stephanie, is it possible, I don't expect it tonight, but could you tell us at some point what amounts of this year's budget for like acquisitions and capital projects we're really moving over to next year's budget? Because really, it's just gonna be in bigger fund balance at the end of this year, right? That we're gonna be drawing down on next year to make those purchases, correct?
Correct. So you want to know what was in the capital plan last year?
What we're
that is-
rolling over.
That we didn't spend,
Yeah,
that we're going to roll
That we're
over.
rolling over, so we could just have an idea, because
Yep.
those numbers look big, and I suspect a lot of those capital improvements are some of that.
Some are and some are new,
Yeah,
because we are, moving forward with our facilities.
Yeah, but-
Not only,
But if you could
Yeah,
kind of give us
absolutely.
that idea, that would be, and, there's a lot of information in the budget, and I see the projects that are in the budget. Do you somehow have a list of the projects that actually got moved off that we could see also?
Yeah.
Like capital expenditures. You can't always,
I don't know what you mean by moved off.
well, I mean that we didn't, that aren't in this year's budget, that we just said we didn't have the money for, so we're pushing them off to another year.
I can look, I don't know that our process
That's why I asked. If
necessarily
you can't,
does
that's
that,
fine.
because what I will tell you is that
They all have their wish list, and you got.
I have a really good staff, or you all have a very good
Right.
staff, and they typically only bring forward those projects that they anticipate being able to do
Okay.
that year.
Oh, that's fine. All right.
It's rare that I get a huge wish list,
Okay.
but I will go through my notes and make sure,
Just if you.
but you'll see some of the projects that are fiscal year '25, some are because they require planning, and so
Okay.
you don't make this big of an expenditure one year, because the bigger expenditure will come the following year, so.
Okay, but the only position we're really adding for next year's budget is just in your office.
And we're not even adding.
It's-
We're
it's-
literally reallocating funds that were for an intern into a different,
But it's going to be a part-time, permanent position?
no,
Oh,
there are no permanent positions
Okay.
in any realm, just so everybody knows. That's
I
a
didn't
word.
understand, that's why I thought I wanted some
No,
clarification.
and that's just what I tell everybody all the time, because we're currently an at-will, and so
I
that
know.
means at-will, no permanency. It's a part-time position, non-benefited position, so it may be filled by an intern as the sustainability. It's a new position that we're looking at now that we are looking at the EV readiness program. We are doing, where we have the lead, the Smart Soul Smart certification, all of those things. Everything is going towards how we can be more sustainable. That was with your environmental
Right, it was.
stewardship priority. So it's starting with that to see what that position might look like and what it might do.
So it might be an intern, it might be
It might be
somebody,
an intern, it might be just a part-time position.
which could carry over to future years? Okay, I just keep it to general tonight, so, okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Question, if I may, and I think I know this, but if those dates can be moved, right? The public hearing and the final adoption? Or is that?
Well, the public hearing can't,
Okay,
but the final adoption can.
okay,
We are not required to adopt the same night as the public hearing, but we are required to publish the public hearing,
okay.
so.
But, and we just, if we move it off a week or two, the final adoption, it's not, if we get really into some questions, it's a lot to go through with these capital improvements this time. It's not a be-all,
Right.
end-all, okay?
And I would just also say, the budget is not a be-all, end-all, because it's a
Yeah.
planning document.
I know,
And
yeah.
this body has the ability to amend it at any time they see fit by a 2/3 vote.
Yep, okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Rich. Becky?
Thank you. On that note, Stephanie, are we planning on supporting the Geneva History Museum in this budget? Did we allocate funds for that?
So what we did is we allocated funds for an economic development / tourism grant program that we're finalizing kind of what the parameters might look like. So we have money there, but what we'd like to do is come back to the council to a policy discussion to see what that grant looks like, much like what we discussed at strategic planning. So right now, we do not have specific funding earmarked for the History Museum. We also received a request for a presentation and a request for funding from the Foundation for the Arts. So this is along those veins that we need to ensure that we're being judicious with the dollars, and so we were going to bring forward the grant program.
Okay, and is the grant program reflected in the tourism fund, or?
It's in the Economic Development Department and in the Tourism Fund.
Okay. Would that be under program support, or do you know? It's on page 39. I just printed the
Yeah.
tourism fund, page 39 of the packet.
Yeah, program support, I think that's correct. Under the
Okay.
Tourism Fund.
Yeah, I just noticed there was a decrease.
Because, Yeah, and then we also put money in the economic development, which
Okay.
is in the general fund.
Okay. And then, can you tell me, I've lost track of that discussion. Did the History Museum receive any funding to date?
So they are budgeted this year to receive funding. We are working on a funding agreement,
Okay, and it was $50,000?
roughly based on revenues, yes.
Was it a percentage, or I thought it was
It's a percentage.
Okay, and it was what, 20%?
I think it was a percentage, but I think we budgeted 50,000, but that money is still in play this fiscal year.
Okay. And you said we're still working on the
agreement.
The agreement.
Actually, I just had a conversation this evening.
Okay. Can I ask what the status of the agreement is, or?
To bring it to the council to see, get your feedback, and then.
Okay, so
We were trying to come to an agreement prior, but we need to bring it to you all first.
Okay, so will that be an agenda
Soon,
item soon?
yes.
Okay. And just an idea, and this may be useless, but I was thinking, or wondering if the agreement could be similar to the chamber agreement, if we could maybe use the chamber as a template for the History Museum?
So, a little bit unrelated to tonight's discussion, but I would say no, that would not be a wise idea, only because the chamber agreement is from 1987.
Okay.
And I think that would not be good governance to model an agreement after agreement that's been in place for so long that actually is not really functioning the way it was intended originally.
Okay.
But we are looking at what other communities have done for their funding agreements, and that's what the
Okay.
base is.
Yeah, I just, I know we talked about the grant program. I don't remember if we had a consensus or not, but personally, I am really interested in supporting the History Museum specifically, for a myriad of reasons that I don't need to, but I feel it's a little off topic, but I would really like to see the History Museum specifically noted in this budget. So that's where I stand on the issue. So I don't know how the others feel, but
All right.
we'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Bruno?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To that same topic, I believe we did have a consensus that we would strongly be considering a grant program, but I also think we had consensus on that being implemented after this budgeting cycle, so as not to blindside the current recipients of those monies.
So I would say the History Museum was a one-time funding is what we decided. The reason we have not yet brought you a policy because we do have ideas in place that we would like to bring to you to not blindside other agencies, for lack of a better phrase. I think that's not a good phrase, but I'll use your words. So I think there is a way to implement a grant program in this fiscal year '24 without detrimentally impacting certain organizations.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Tara?
Thank you, Alderman Malletta. Stephanie, if you were in our, thanks for the presentation. If you were in our seat, what would you be looking at most closely? This could be, it's overwhelming from sitting in
absolutely.
this point, I mean, where's the most struggle, or where's the most, like, the tightness, or the parts that worry you or keep you up at night?
So this budget does not keep me up at night. I think if I were sitting in your place, what I would be looking for is it addressing the priorities that the council set? Is it addressing the policies that we have in place? As far as fiscal responsibility, I think this is a very sound budget. We are in, I mean, I dare say we're in good fiscal shape, but that is one of the reasons why we are recommending so much expenditures into capital, because capital is where we have been lacking for so long. If we do not invest in our infrastructure and invest in our capital and our built environment, the rest of it doesn't matter. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have some catastrophic failure that might have been prevented, but we were afraid to spend the money we had to fix it. So really, that's what keeps me up at night is if we're not doing the investments we should be doing, what's going to happen? So I think that's why, I guess I should have stood up there, but the slide I showed at the end about operating expenses versus capital expenses versus personnel, I think it's a really nicely shaped pie to show a good balance between running a city and investing in our future.
I do think Geneva residents got a pretty good bargain when you talk about $575 or whatever going to city services. I want to just emphasize what Becky said, you know, I would like to see some permanent funding for the Geneva History Museum. I think I've been clear on that. I look forward to our next discussion about it. I do hope we can wrap up the funding for this year. We've been talking about it a long time, so I'd like to see that get taken care of. So, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Dean?
Yeah, I've got 3 points here. As far as the budgeting, we have vacancies apparently from the presentation by HR earlier that are unfilled. What approximately would be the count of vacancies that we're still trying to staff?
So actively recruiting, I think there are 2 positions for sure. When I looked at the numbers today, I believe that we are authorized for 155 employees. That includes the utilities, everybody. We
Right.
currently have 146 full-time employees.
So we're down about 9 head
Yeah, so I mean, we're down
head count.
police officer, 2 police officers, we're down a deputy fire chief, we're down a building inspector,
Public Works, anything?
Public Works, yeah, we got fleet supervisor, lineman, yeah, it's across the board, we have vacancies.
So 9 is about
Yeah,
About
146, yeah.
7.5% of our total workforce is still needing to be filled.
And that doesn't account for any unforeseen or planned retirements that are coming up.
So that's going to weigh, was that factored or taken into consideration as far as the determination of the balance of the 2023 budget, our projected?
Some of it was, some of it is not. Like, we try to forecast when we think a position will be filled. But again, that's why when you look at the budget numbers for positions, that assumes that all positions are filled all the time.
Okay, so if we're not able to fill a position within the parameters that we have for the position, then do we continue to search, or do we exceed the high end to fill that position? In other words, in industry, or what my work experience is that depending on the personality, the individual that's applied, their skill set, years of experience, and all those factors, are there occasions where we go beyond what is the recommended parameters for a position?
There are occasions that, so our recommended parameters, you have the comp plan in your book, and you will see that there's a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. We
Sure,
typically
that's
hire
right.
new hires within minimum to midpoint, somewhere in there. If there is a outstanding candidate or a hard-to-fill position, we sometimes go above that hiring range. We never go above the maximum, because this is the adopted plan by the city council.
Okay, although under the current environment, it would appear that maybe we're needing
But-
to stretch those numbers.
But that's the concern. If you stretch a number for, let's say, a position that's in range 38,
Yeah.
you have now affected every range above that.
Okay, well,
So that's why we suggest doing a market rate study, so that you're looking at the picture as a
Right.
whole instead of doing one-offs.
so we always play within the range.
We try to play within the range. We color within the squares.
Good. And then, as it relates to salaried employees, what was the factor that we used in establishing the 23-24 budget and the 24-25 budget then? In other words, I guess, for lack of a better term, percentage of increase overall within
I don't have
salaried
that number off the
employees.
top of my head.
Okay, well, that's one that we can address at a later point.
Okay.
And then finally, personally, I would have an interest, we have all of our department heads tonight, and we haven't really had an opportunity to hear from any of them. I would like to have an opportunity maybe on the 23rd for our department heads to give us maybe a 5 to 10 minute overview of the budgeting process, what they see as their priorities, what issues are impacting their budgets for the upcoming year. I think that, sometimes we don't, periodically we get an opportunity for all of you to appear before us, but I would like to see a collective presentation by the department heads. And again, I'm not asking you to devote a lot of time to this, but I'm just saying to give a verbal presentation of what's happening within your department over in a 5 to 8 minute presentation, talking about the highlights, where there's a major expenditure or where you might see some challenges as we look at the upcoming year. And I think that really gives the council then a good overview of what's happening within the city on a department by department basis. And I guess I would ask the other council members if they would have an interest in that. And again, I don't want to take 3 or 4 hours to do this. I'm saying 5 to 8 minutes. And again, touch on the highlights. And I think that would be beneficial. That's all I have. And I guess I'd ask the rest of the council if that would be something that they would be agreeable to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful, Dean, so.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. So, first of all, the pensions, the amount that we contribute to the pensions, that's not voluntary. That's dictated by some practice?
Yeah, so for IMRF, which are your non-public safety pensions, that is determined by IMRF. They send the contribution rate. I would note that for fiscal year '24, that amount has actually gone down. The public safety pensions are done by an actuarial study, and that's part of the tax levy that you approved, and that amount is set as well.
Okay.
And just trivia, we are pretty close to being 50% of our employees are Tier 1, and 50% of our employees are Tier 2. What that means is that 50% of our employees have been hired after 2011, and it's less money for us on the pension side for the Tier 2 folks.
All right, thank you. Let's see, what was my next one? I was curious about the fire truck that's in the budget. I was hoping that the chief could come up. There's a fire truck 2 in there. Is that something we'll learn about later, or?
He's here. I don't know if this is the payment that we're making on the fire truck.
It's $1.1 million in the budget? Is that part of last year?
That's this year's budget, I think, that's what I want to find. Yeah, and my capital sheet.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Yeah, the truck you didn't know, right? Am I missing it? It's in the capital equipment, I thought.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Thank you.
All right, so you don't have a fire truck? Was I looking at the wrong year? Oh, I'm sorry.
Potentially.
Fire truck 201 replacement, 1.136.
What, I don't know what page you're on.
I'm on the capital improvement budget, section 430.
Hang on, hold on. Are you in the packet?
Yeah. Do you want to see on mine?
I'm thinking we're not looking
That's
to
fiscal year
replace a fire
23.
truck.
Were you looking at last year's budget?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the truck we have?
Yes, we do have it.
Good.
Please don't scare me like that.
Well, I'm glad that we're not buying another truck.
No, you're not the only one.
Pop quiz pass.
Okay.
Ask them if it's in repair.
I think that when I look at the budget, I see a lot of work to do in So it's going to be a big struggle to get all of this money spent, actually. That's how I see it.
I don't disagree, it's an aggressive budget, but again, it's a plan. So, and we know that some things might get done and some things might not, and we might have to make some shifts and adjustments. But this is, in an ideal world, everything that that departments would like to try to accomplish.
So I brought it up before the meeting, but also just want to bring it up to the group here. The sidewalks project was delayed last year, and it's a yearly thing that happens. And I think the intent is to include last year's budget into this year so that we get a greater scope of work for sidewalk replacement in the coming year. I also think that we should adjust the way that we look at it and look at critical needs and actually repair all the sidewalks that need to be repaired instead of, doing a fixed amount of work. I think that the residents of Geneva benefit greatly from having their sidewalks in front of their homes and in their neighborhoods be, suitable and not have great level changes. So I'd like to see that in the coming year. And then I was wondering what this disposal of banned foam was that was on the one slide.
That's a fire issue as well. It's the foam that they use in firefighting that they can no longer use. I'll let the chief speak to it.
But we have to dispose of it now?
Yeah, because we can't use it.
Yes, some foams, AFFF foam, which has got, if you've heard of Forever Chemicals, contains that. There is a ban by the state. Effective the first of the year, we can't use it anymore. But they name no provisions of how to get rid of it and how to pay for it, so we have it in storage. And
We have to dispose of that.
either there'll be something shortly or we'll work through it ourselves. The good news is we don't have a lot of it, but it is problematic, so kind of under the unfunded mandate that Stephanie was talking about earlier.
Okay. And then the motor fuel tax, just for my own edification, is that gas stations in Geneva contributing to that, or is that kind of a share of
It's
some
a
larger?
share per capita.
Per capita share? So it's not anything to do with how many?
No, because if it was, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah, we don't have a lot. All right, that concludes my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Gabe?
Thank you. I'm looking forward to everybody's sales pitch next week, so. For the reserve fund, or when you talk about the 90 days worth of, revenue that we keep on hands, is that the same as the reserve fund? Or is that's essentially what the reserve, it's not like there's a reserve fund and then there's also that other part?
No,
It's the
so-
same thing.
Correct.
So is that 35 million, 32 million?
No, it's not. It's more like 13 million or, I don't know, I'd have to look it up.
Okay, I would be curious
It's
to know
like
what
13
that
to
is,
15
because,
million.
well, 90 days is 25% of a year.
Yeah, we are well in excess of that with this budget.
Okay, I'd like to know what the number is for the next time that we meet. Thank you.
Yep.
Rita, do you have that?
That's okay. So at the end of '23, we have 14.4 million.
I was supposed to say 13.
Ready?
Thank you. Yeah, can you clarify, just for the benefit of everyone tuning in and perhaps everyone here at the dais, that reserve fund is based on not all funds?
No, we are just talking general fund. Am I
Exactly. So
correct?
it's
That's
not
what you were
based on the
speaking of?
enterprise funds or the entire budget Okay, per se? so it's
Oh,
only the
wait a
general, okay, no, that's,
Yeah, yeah, only general funds. So the three funds that have a reserve policy would be general, 25% of fund balance. Electric and water have 25% cash balance. So not their fund balance, because remember, those are full accrual funds. They have things like their capital, all their infrastructure, and we don't look at that as a number. So we look at cash, because in a proprietary fund, you're looking more about cash flow. The fact that you can pay off your debt or pay off your bills as the revenue's coming in.
Okay, thank you.
And just one last, where's the new fire truck fund?
Where's the new fire truck, what? Funded?
Sorry, chief.
Ooh, yeah,
Bob, then Brad.
Thank you. In the capital fund, we have a design police facility line item for $500,000. And I'm not sure we have a plot of land that we plan on putting it on. So my question is this a generic design that we could put anywhere? Or,
Again, it's planning so that we're able to design. We still have, the fiscal year doesn't start until May 1, so we have time between now and May 1 or June 1 or October 1 to determine where we might want to put that facility.
okay.
So, but it was planning so that things keep moving.
Okay, fair enough. We spent a lot of time tonight talking about preliminary plans and plans that changed, and it became very painful, so I just want to make sure we're not repeating that process and have to
No,
redo a $500,000 plan.
No, this would not be a plan that could go anywhere. We would, before we embark on this, we would know where we wanted to put it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Brad?
I wanted to ask about bicycle plans. So I guess this is a question for Rich. This is in your budget, is that right? So we have $80,000 for a classification plan. That's for a consultant? Staff time?
That's for a consultant.
So I guess what does that mean, a classification system, and what would the consultant hypothetically be doing?
If you recall, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
If you recall, at strategic planning, there was a presentation for the bike plan, and there were recommended routes and requests by SPAC for staff to look into. And in order to ensure that those routes are being fully vetted and reviewed and done in accordance with federal and state guidelines, the routes have to be, each one has to be reviewed individually, and then the appropriate determination made for what is the appropriate bike plan. Is it signage? Is it a protected lane? Is it a separated lane? Is it a common lane? So there's different criteria that need to be evaluated. And this way, we can hand the entire recommended list to a consultant. They can review it, and then we can use that information in future budgets for implementation or to be implemented in next year's budget cycle if resources allow.
I do remember that. We've had a few discussions about it. Do you think that'll come up for a discussion before we go out for bids on that consultant? Like, maybe we want to adjust that list a little bit, or add some ideas to it, or take some away, or give SPAC another go at it, if that's in their allotted time, I have no idea. Or is this something you feel like you have enough information and you're going to pull the trigger when the time is right in the next fiscal year?
I thought it was very clear direction received by SPAC and the city council at strategic planning, but again, as City Administrator Stephanie has stated, it is a budget planning document, so things can be changed. What we're trying to do is ensure that we have the information going into future budget cycles so we can start incorporating those projects into future infrastructure, which I also heard it was clear direction from SPAC and the city council that moving forward, they want that bike plan being actively implemented with existing resources.
Well, that sounds great. I think we could maybe do one quick review on it, but ultimately, I really just wanted to thank you for having it in here. I know it's something I specifically requested. I'm not sure others, maybe there was consensus on it, but having a separate line item for it is very reassuring. So I just want to say thank you for having that in there.
All right. Any further questions? Nope. All right, I guess that's it. No action tonight. If desired, January 23rd meeting. When do we decide if that's
Well, it
desired?
sounds like, I sort of heard a consensus. I
Yeah.
heard 3 people, but I heard a consensus that you want all of the department heads to attend next week. We are already having a meeting next week. We're having a special committee of the whole meeting to talk about updates to the personnel policy manual. So this would be in addition to that.
Okay. Clear.
Is that correct? I have consensus? And then at that meeting, you can determine whether you need a meeting on the 30th.
Got it.
Or now, if you think you need 2 meetings.
I can't see that far ahead. Okay, so nothing else on item 4A. 5, public comment. No public. How about new business? Does anybody on the committee have any new business for the committee? No, if not, then a motion to adjourn is in order. Rich, all in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.